I'm pedantic about the light temperature. I do think it's the easiest, most cost effective way to totally change an experience. Like you could just go in and put in a few new speakers and all new light bulbs in an existing hotel and change the entire way it's experienced, right? I think that's probably like the most low hanging fruit there is, and thing that is easily and often overlooked.
All right, John Grossman, the first guest to ever come back twice. It was one of my favorite episodes. And it's funny, we have a friend of ours who's also in the hospitality business, and they always quote your line, "Don't fight the building." So it's been actually an important line that I've interwoven into my business. But welcome back to the podcast. And I'm awesomely excited to talk about more things and talk about you and everything else.
That's awesome to be back. And it's funny, I've been invoking that mantra very recently, and I've added to it a little bit, where we kind of challenge our team to take the Hippocratic Oath of the physical space. And that's basically an extension of don't fight the building. And that's, do no harm. So we were looking at a model room process right now recently, and a design team was trying to spend a lot of money to make the conditions, in my opinion, worse, which is effectively fighting the building. And, you just have to make the judgment call. If you're spending more money and time and effort, and you're estimating as the owner, as the operator, that it's going to result in a less optimal guest experience, then you just got to stop, and you have to jump in. And at this point, we're at 50% schematic. It's the perfect time to really take stock of what we're doing, why we're doing it. We don't even have real pricing back at all, but you just kind of see patterns over time, and it's certainly not rocket science to say, if you're moving a TV, the cabling, if you're trying to reposition the closet, if you're reducing the closet size and height and width, it's like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, stop. We're fighting the building. You're breaking the Hippocratic Oath. So I kind of recentered everybody on that, and it's helpful to kind of simplify what we're doing and why we're doing it, and it just kind of it's less of a subjective statement and more of something that we can move forward through objectively. And then we can bring in a subjective assessment of the design and the kind of the experience thereafter. But the fundamentals are important to get right. And I'm always making mistakes, and they're never 100%. And I think it's a pursuit, but it's not a realistic goal to think that you can get to 100% correct in any of these decisions.
You've really mastered the art of reinvigorating life into older buildings, forgotten about hotels. And a lot of people like to develop, but I'm actually more interested in what you're doing because I think it's more practical for a lot of people. Development is a big undertaking. You can miss cycles, but if you already have the building, it's really interesting. And I think a lot of people are going to be doing that, particularly as we move forward. It might be sensitive because it's like a live project, but I'd love for you to kind of maybe unpack that model room review moment a little bit more and go into like what you were thinking and what perspectives you were bringing to, your point of view and why you needed to pull them back a little bit.
Yeah, I would answer it in two parts. So kind of the global question of or inquiry around investing in existing assets versus pure development. I think there's people that are really set up for it and do a very, very good job of pure development, and they're not operators. They're merchant builders. They're doing the hard work. It's a specific skill, a tremendous amount of respect for how hard that is. And it's extremely risky. Like you said, if you miss the cycle, if you get delayed and you've got a loan on the land to begin with, you're really walking a tightrope. And so we aren't necessarily geared up for pure development. We are geared up for additive development. And so that's, in our case, as you just pointed out, taking existing buildings and resurrecting them with major repositionings. But, the good news is we keep as much as possible the properties that we take over open throughout the entire process. And you'd say, well, that's insane. It's painful. It's precarious, and it's very, very difficult on our operating team. They know that's what we do. But boy, is it nice to have cash flow. I mean, effectively, it's a covered land play, a transitional covered land play for, 12, 24, 36, 60 months sometimes. I mean, it can take a long time for these things to come to fruition. But You set yourself up with conservative loan. You're covering debt service in the meantime. You can take your time. You can really understand the experience. And so, as private investors without any outside partners, we really have a specific lens on how we view these investment horizons and these investment goals. And so it just allows us to move in ways that are a little bit less common than the hard charging funds that have to get in and out, who I also have a lot of respect for. It's just a different imperative. It's a different return profile. And we don't sell. We're more interested in the stabilizing, replacing debt, long-term debt. I was just looking at our maturities, and across our portfolio, we're over 8 years
Wow.
blended maturities. So those are good loans that we placed in at a good point in time when the interest rates were very, very low. So to your question about the model room, it is not sensitive. We have actually announced it. We're doing a major phased renovation, repositioning. I wouldn't call it hard repositioning, but a kind of incremental repositioning to the Arizona Grand Resort, which is our largest asset by far. A couple of years ago, we pulled in a new PUD and have the zoning overlay for a very, very large expansion. So, in the overview, this is a 744 room resort, 160 acres, 18-hole golf course, over 100,000 feet of indoor space, and, probably 50,000 more of outdoor flexible meeting space. And so we can expand it, and we're going to take it to up to 1,000 rooms. We have some flexibility, but call it 1,000 rooms and some additional commercial space, maybe, 2 or 3 or 400 apartments, maybe a retail precinct that this is, I'll be old and gray and I'll have grandkids by the time this is all done. But, we'll be the private owners of one of the largest resorts in the Southwest. And, when you hit the 1,000 room mark, you're competing against, very specific markets, Orlando, Vegas, and not many more, right? I mean, there's only so many resorts that can handle groups of that size. And so we're taking our time. And the first thing we're doing is, just 644 rooms as our first chunk. And so, you can imagine the number of
You
model
can't
rooms
screw
we
that
do.
up.
I mean, if you change a light switch, it costs you, $300,000. It's mind numbing when you talk about numbers this big and the decisions that you make. And so when we're talking about the Hippocratic Oath, it becomes very, very serious and very real. Like, why would we move the TV 3.5 feet? I mean, you'd say, oh, it's easy, no big deal. And the IT guy will walk in and say, oh, you just run the cable, and the builder will walk in and say, oh, you could just, throw out the wall and you're just like, whoa, I know it's easy, like, for you, because that's what you want to do and you're good at that. And we love the fact that you're excited to do this work, but it's not easy on the pocketbook. And you have to kind of have this, running accounting in your mind of the moves that you're making, in real time, so that you can just get people to focus in on the things that are really practical. But at the end of the day, this is a planned $25 million renovation, and it's a huge number, but it's a very small amount of actual dollars that you can utilize per room to make an impact. I mean, we're talking like $30,000 a room, plus or minus. And in today's dollars, that's like nothing, man. I mean, you blink and you spend $30,000 in a room,
Yeah.
especially if you want to touch the bathroom. I mean, at that
Yeah.
point,
Bathrooms are
that can
$15,000, $20,000 today.
totally. Now, we do have the benefits of efficiencies of scale, of course. So in this case, the bathrooms will be driven down, call it $8,000 to $10,000, but still, it takes a third of your budget. And then
Yep.
what do you got left?
Yep.
So that's just where it's just kind of ironic. At that big scale, you just have a different calculus. You have all of these big moves, and then the cost per room comes down. And then at the small scale, you can be more creative and you can do a lot more kind of bespoke moves, but the price per room is just, mind numbing. At the La Playa hotel that we just repositioned, we're all in for not quite 20 million, but 18 or $19 million. That included a full new HVAC and new piping throughout the hotel. So, basically it's a new hotel from the inside. And then in Laguna, a similar situation, not quite as expensive, but, some big moves, and it just adds up so quickly on a price per key basis. It's just not comparable to these big boxes. So it's you
Yeah,
have to
but
kind
like
of, yeah.
you spent $20 million on those two little hotels, and now you're going to spend a little bit more on a hotel that's maybe 6 times the size of those hotels. How do you, as a very design focused person, someone that I get a lot of inspiration from looking at your properties. How are you also balancing the cost thing? Because I don't know, maybe you're looking at that TV and you're like, yeah, it would look better 3 feet over. How do you figure out how to balance the cost, but also what decisions to make and which ones to be like, guys, we need to just leave the TV here because I want to spend the money somewhere else?
It's a really good question, and the short answer is we really study the brands. Our pre-analysis for this model room renovation started months ago when we spread out as a team and with our core team on the project side, including our senior management team, all the people that we're bringing to bear in the meetings that we have to make these decisions have spent nights at all the different competitive hotels in the market and beyond, and all the new hotels that not necessarily would be competitors, like a new AC. There's a new Remy that's kind of a really cool soft brand in Old Town Scottsdale. So anything that's new, anything that caters to the market that we're going after, we have like 3 volumes of notes and pictures, and we go back to those and we specifically point to, are we making an impact like the brands? We're really playing against the brands in a way that we don't in our boutique and independent portfolio. So if we get to the end of this renovation and we don't have all of the bare fundamental brand standards in place, whether it's, plugins or hard surfaces, the ways in which the furniture storage works, cubic feet of storage, for example, like we study all of that. So this becomes much more of a question of a problem associated with making sure we don't mess up the fundamentals first and foremost, and then we can layer in the design afterwards. And then we are going to be more adventurous. This is not a beige room, right? Like we we then can use paint and we can use fabrics and we can tell a story. Those are things that you have to do anyways. And so it's probably more like, I'd say 60 to 75% are the fundamentals, and maybe 40 to 30% would be the kind of flourishes where we hope to, signal a point of view and take a risk on that point of view, because there's no medium planner that you can tour through a room and get a real answer out of. They don't know. They know a lot about putting on events and they know a lot about representing the needs of their clients, but they are not the people to ask, do you think that wall should be, yellow or purple or beige? They're always going to go with beige. You're not going to be able to point to like an interesting light fixture and say, does that connect with you? Does that turn the dial? Those things are not in their purview. They will come in and say they don't like things, and that's absolutely a concern. But as we center ourselves in a point of view, it's then, our job as the owner and the operator to inform our sales team as to why. Because a lot of times as long as people know why you've done something, they may not like it, but at least if they respect it and they can understand it, it can get you a lot of the way there. And you're not going to please all people at all times. That's not the business any one of us should be in. I think there's a race to the bottom when you try and do that. And I think that in the big box space where there's a lot of brand competition, that's why everything's safe and beige. And, that's totally fine. It's unobjectionable. But to your point, that's not who we are. And as independent owners and operators, we want to be proud that there's a difference, and we want to communicate the reason why. And we hope that we can bring people along. Now, I'm not talking about crazy stuff, but there's things on the margin that can be really, really interesting that connect on a subliminal level. And we also do, color studies ourselves that wouldn't be quite as sophisticated as, the psychological color studies that the brands would do. But we really try and think about the colors, from the front door to the foyer, to the living area, to the guest room, and kind of tell a story, an emotional story through the use of color to really hopefully make people feel at ease and feel comfortable. And above all, as we've talked about, it's not important to ask people when they're in the space why they like the space. It's you just have to make decisions where you believe that what's washing over them connects with them in a way that's either direct and liminal or subliminal, in a way that they're not sure why it feels good, but it just feels good. Whether it's the color temperature next to the reading on, the reading lamp on the bedside, or the ways in which they look in the bathroom when they're getting ready to go, to their meeting, and they look good and feel good. Things that you can't really put a finger on, but taken all together makes people feel feel their best. And in a media center, media space, that's really important. People are selling, and there's their livelihood on the line, and they're walking out the door to take charge of the world and make their numbers or make the connections to do the networking that they're there to do.
Talk to me a little bit about the bathroom, because that's always a very difficult one. And you're having to solve this across 670 rooms. And then you're kind of getting inspiration from the brands, which I always think get inspiration from people like you. So, like, you're kind of round tripping this. What are you doing in the bathrooms to make it special, unique, hit all the marks that you want to hit?
This is a very difficult problem for us because we have a hotel that would not meet any brand standards. And in fact, we fight with AAA all the time because our sink is not in the wet room. The sink is in the guest room, the
Yeah.
bedroom. So that's kind of an older style of doing things. I think it's fine. I mean, I have no
Yeah.
problem with it, but there's just one of these funny little things with AAA, and they have like a checkbox, and if you tally it all up, and if you don't have the right number of scores, and they just give you, so you fight with them and you say, this is kind of ridiculous, guys. I know that you don't like it, but this is an outdated scorecard. And so, putting that aside, we have an opportunity to lean into this as opposed to be ashamed of it and try and apologize for it. And so we're really designing a beautiful. It's kind of a full wall of a vanity, a closet, a TV, and a second kind of workspace vanity top. And we're just looking that the entire thing is kind of a beautiful design moment, and so that the wall itself all works together, and it's not a bathroom and it's not a closet. It's kind of its own yet to be defined monolithic kind of design expression. That's where we're letting the designer have a lot of freedom. And we're working with Alexa Nafisi, who was at Aberco, and we worked with her and did High Country Motor Lodge. And she's one of our favorite designers to work with. She's just incredible designer, extremely professional person who is highly creative and probably one of the most technically gifted people we've worked with. I mean, the amount of work that she can produce and the amount of time that she does it is, and this is like not AI assisted. This is just like her, and I don't know how she does it.
Wow.
So, so she's come up with a really interesting way to treat this whole space. Of course, lighting is essential. We're doing backlit mirrors plus a decorative lighting, so you kind of have a dual layer of lighting. The surface top is going to be upper upscale, like it's going to be like reconstituted stone top, but it's she's found a pattern that looks and feels like it's more elevated and more like a natural stone. Now, this is not rocket science, of course, but the way that she's going to treat the edge detailing, and then of course, how does she modularize it so we can repeat it on a very large scale, and then we're going to invest in the fixtures, and again, that's expected, but taken all together, it's just going to be an expression that is elegant and elevated, and that's just what you see when you're in bed, right? And then when you get into the bathroom and where the shower room is, she's got a couple pretty wild ideas and different treatments. Use of, again, sh- we're limiting her to the type of materials that she can use. So it's just simple porcelain tile, but we're saying to her, let's make it interesting. Let's use interesting patterns. Let's get out over our skis, and we can always come back. But so she's integrating the pattern tile into paint and wallpaper schemes, one of each, that really kind of, when you walk in, it'll feel like it's like a fully designed experience.
Yeah.
And that's scary, right? Like that's always a risk, that if it's a fully designed experience you don't like, then you can say, leave a review that you didn't like it. But this is where we're letting her kind of look at these two spaces and how they relate to each other. But there'll be no denying that you're in kind of like a high design space. She did a really great job of this overall with High Country Motor Lodge, but we had to come back and we actually had to replace the pool. Much to our chagrin, it lasted, much. We thought we were probably gonna have like 6 to 8 years with the pool, and it lasted 2 years. So we had to come back and rebuild the entire pool, and we specifically limited her to a very cost effective, like Home Depot style paver. And you should just go online and look at the photos, because she made this relatively cost effective material look exceedingly interesting and high end. And now, she everyone looks down at the pool, and it's really a showpiece. And it's just,
Wow.
it was a pain in the ass to do it. It cost us a lot of money to do it. We didn't plan to do it so soon, but we can all step back from it and say, wow, she really rose to the challenge. in a way that was really interesting. And did it cost more? Sure. When you're using, you know, different colorways within the same pattern and you're making a specific large scale design, yeah, you have to have a lot more oversight and there's coordination that's different than just like laying down a repeating color. But I couldn't say specifically how much more it cost, but it would only be a couple of percent more, maybe I would say I'm guessing less than 5% more. But it's all about the pre-planning and the thoughtful approach and asking her to be restricted in the use and unrestricted in the flourish and the design. It was a really fun thing that we learned in that process, and we can apply it here at the Arizona brand.
We have a lot of branded hotels, and I think the brands have really started to commoditize. And even as a professional, I think it's hard to differentiate between all the different brands out there. And I think there's really little difference between all the brands out there, other than once you get to kind of the upper upscale level. Frankly, even a nice Sheraton and above could look the same as a JW Marriott. And I'm curious because I'm like reminded of the Steve Jobs quote where it's like, people don't know what they want until you show it to them, or, something on those lines. In a big hotel like this, how much do you think people and the guests care about like the design and the experience? Or do you think they're just going to some big doctor conference and they're just fine, happy to be at whatever hotel in Arizona because the weather's nice and the pool is warm?
It's both. It's so hard. I think our sales team would have a good opinion on that with some data that they would have from meeting planner feedback and guest feedback. But I think one thing that we would say that we really focus on in an area that we might be a little different. Again, it's not super profound, but we really believe that all corporate travelers, all group attendees to large conferences and events are also leisure travelers. And if you think of them also as leisure travelers, then and they can be leisure when they're back in the room and they're not in the session, but more importantly for us, we really, and we can't track this, but we really believe that if we connect with them deeply, that they'll come back with their families. And we have that opportunity in Phoenix at the Arizona Brand with the 10-acre water park. We have a whole
Yep.
summer season where we want these people to come back and bring their families. So if you get on their radar, they may not come back the first year, but they might come back 3 years later. And again, you have no idea there's no possible way that we're aware of to track that. But if you just psychologically position yourself to think that way, then it just allows us to, I think, focus more on the place and focus more on the experience in a way that does have a point of view, right? So like if it's a pure commodity and it's the same hotel room in the same meeting space in Vegas, Phoenix, and Orlando, then I don't think you have that as an opportunity so much. But if it's a place where you walk in and you go, wow, I didn't know this is Phoenix. This is amazing. That's the only place you went to in Phoenix because you got off the plane, you drove 10 minutes to the Arizona Grand, and you're in this large resort setting for 2.5 days and you go home. But if you create the conditions, through design and experience and music and water and landscaping and, guest services, that communicates our point of view as what, Phoenix can be, then I think it transcends, the commodity and it leaves them with an overall kind of residual, recollection of what kind of experience they had there and what they might want to do in the future. And hopefully that is with their families or they come back, because they live in, Minneapolis and they want to come back and escape the winter, right? The next year.
Percent.
And so I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how we think about our group meeting is always, how do we sell it? Of course, it has to have the fundamentals to sell it, the meeting space, and the function of the room so that you can conduct business in your room, whether there's technological integration so you can have a mini presentation on the TV in your room or you can have a good workspace. But then how do you, outside of those core fundamentals, then how do you flourish it and how do you connect it in a way that has a point of view that speaks to where you are and isn't afraid of where you are? Because we're not only going to invest in places that we want to be ourselves and places that we think are interesting that have, longevity and a point of view, right? I mean, Phoenix has a point of view. Principally, that's the only group market we're in, but we like to show off what we think of we like to, kind of reinterpret our lens of what Phoenix can be for people, and what that, And by the way, we also have an axiom that people come to Phoenix and they think they want the desert, but they really want Hawaii. That's like we
Yep.
believe that. So if that's our belief, then we have a really landscape forward assessment of how the experience should unfold. Sure, you can have zero escape out on the fringe, next to the major roads that you've just driven in on. But as soon as you get into the major arterial, the first thing you need to see is water, and around all of that water needs to be lush and verdant. A lot of ficuses, of course, because they're so hardy. But it's just lush and green, and there's water all of a sudden. And then as you get into the inner courtyards, then it all of a sudden becomes like you're kind of sitting around the pool at Hawaii, and you're not out in the desert. I think it's a big mistake to do zero escape. I know that there's significant concerns with water use, of course, in the desert, but there's ways to use water wisely and have a verdant, lush experience that communicates that you're on vacation, that you're not in a harsh desert environment where you've never been before and you feel like you're going to get, attacked by some exotic animal
Scorpion.
that's crawling around on that can only survive under the 120-degree sun, right? So we don't want any of that, and we really focus on creating the conditions for people to feel very much at ease and enveloped in nature and enveloped in water, and we kind of use the desert oasis model, right? So it's very common, but I think it's easy to get away from, and there's a lot of resorts that don't do it, and so that's a really important place just to start with. If you're walking around and it's not oppressively hot, and you're near water fountains and under shade, psychologically you feel better already.
A friend of mine bought a hotel here in Florida and he's renovating it. He showed me the pictures of all the landscaping he just installed, and he hired this famous landscape architect. And he didn't touch the outside of the building. It was this 1960s three-story motel, exterior corridors, and he painted the building kind of white with some green accents, and then totally lushly landscaped this whole beautiful courtyard, which was a disaster before. It was just completely bare and vacant, and you saw right in. Talk to me about your approach a little bit more to the landscaping and the exterior experiences of your properties, and maybe how that's changed over the past few years.
Yeah, I think I would say it's the way it's changed is that we probably are more inclined to start start with landscaping first and integrate it in the front end of the design process more than we had previously. I think that's something that a lot of people miss. I think we missed it. I think it's the easiest place for budget to be cut at the end of a project. So we make sure that we don't cut it, right? So we start with landscaping first. We create the zones, and it's easy to define kind of where you've arrived and what the zones are and the different kinds of landscaping that you want to have experienced by the guest. And then you kind of create that concept and then build around it so that you don't lose it. I think that's the simplest and most important thing that we've done. And then we've also started hiring, you know, in our opinion, bring in a brand name landscape designers who we think are really interesting, who are doing things that are very creative. Again, it's always important to push back on the budget, because a lot of landscapers want to use a lot of hardscape, and the plants end up kind of being a secondary thought for some of them, not all of them, of course. And so like we just have to balance that too right up the front, and we try and do very limited hardscape enhancements. Anything that we're doing from a hardscape perspective, it's always because we're creating a new outdoor meeting space or wedding venue. And that's like where we limit it. We aren't just doing hardscape to hardscape. We try and reuse a lot of the existing pathways. And again, it's like don't fight the building version of landscape. Like don't don't
Yep.
don't realign the path. Why? I know you want it to be curved, but it's straight, and we're just going to leave it straight. So put a nice terminated vista at the end. Put in a fountain at the end. That's a lot cheaper than trying to realign the whole path, because you've got these fundamentals of landscape architecture in your mind, which are valid, of course, but not practical always. And so we always have that kind of creative tension.
I always learn so much from you because we're renovating a hotel right now and we're starting with a big landscaping component. And I was thinking the other day, like, man, it would be nice if this patio, this walkway just swooped out a little bit and had some movement. But now I'm like, yeah, maybe it's not going to do what I need it to do. So we don't have to do it. I love it.
I
In
mean,
the, I want to
there's yeah.
Go ahead.
I
Go
will
ahead.
say, I will say, lighting is the most important thing not to cut out of your landscaping budget.
Exterior
Lighting,
lighting.
exterior lighting. I think there's different kinds of lighting that come in and out of vogue, bollard lighting and up lighting and this, that, and the other. But I just, we always, we always edit and we always VE, but it's something that really creates a difference of experience at night. When you want people to feel a certain mood, you always want them to feel safe. That's always a concern because I like things super dark. I like everything darker than, like, people fight me all the time, and it's like, but that's a problem outside if it's too dark because people can, if you feel unsafe, that's like you've missed it, right? And so we do fight that tension, especially with an exterior courtyard hotel where and we have a couple of those, several of those. And so, but the mood, the lighting, sort of unexpected light fixtures that are either integrated into the landscape and are up in the trees, and then we also try not to skimp on sound. So whether that's through the use of fountains, obviously that's a natural sound which is wonderful, and but then also there's really sophisticated and relatively cost effective speakers now that can be, I mean, they have been around for a long time, but they've gotten even better, right? Like landscaping speakers now are just like super high quality. And so you don't have to turn up really loud and don't impact your guests. You can keep it low, but have a nice sound web as you walk through the space. And I think those things really go a long way to invoke a certain mood, which
Yeah,
I
it's
love.
not just about the lighting, it's also about the temperature and the color of the lighting and how it's used to create shadows. We were just in Paris and they get lighting there. It's just so good. Like, I don't think they have a light that's above maybe like 2,500, or it's all like 2,300. And it's so warm and nice. And we were touring a hotel the other day and we were walking around. There's beautiful gardens and it's all like white light. I'm like, it just, it kills the vibe, it kills the mood, and it actually filters inside. And I was thinking, listening to you talk, that some of the design changes that, the lights are actually telling you should make, maybe if you just change the lights, you might not actually need to change some of these design things on the inside of the building because the lighting is better and you don't need to do anything on the hard stuff.
We got to go to Paris together.
I'm ready. It's like where
So
all the
I could,
inspiration comes from.
absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So as a blanket statement, in all I have a very I'm pedantic about the light temperature. I do think it's the easiest, most cost effective way to totally change an experience. Like, you could just go in and put in a few new speakers and all new light bulbs in an existing hotel and change the entire way it's experienced. Right? I think that's probably like the most low hanging fruit there is, and thing that is easily and often overlooked. But on the lighting side, in all of our hotels, we basically have a mandate that anything that's in the common area is 2200. And
2,200.
well, you start at 2200 because that's sort of that's the most common available bulb. You know, they're not that common. They're not that easy to get. And not all lumens are created equal. You've got frosted and unfrosted, and you've got LEDs and incandescent style LEDs. You've got all sorts of different things, and you kind of have to just go online. And I mean, I spent more time on 1,000 light bulbs is where I always go, and I just get a box of light bulbs and I try them all out. And sometimes, like, it's maddening and bizarre, but it's really fun when you get it right. But basically, all the common areas we try and target 2200, and even into the hallways. And then when you get to your guest room, still 2200 where the mood lighting is. And it's only in the place where you put on makeup. So in the vanity, we go up to 2700. And we also have a dim, the really great bulbs that we got a dim to warm. So a bedside lamp would be a dim to warm. So if you want to read, it's at 2700, and if you want to dim it down, it'll dim down to 2200. But I mean, I'm with you 100%. It's the most important thing. And you can once you start, it's like one of those things you can't unsee, right? Like, once you start becoming aware of lighting temperatures, then you can really kind of dissect experiences that feel good, and hone in on the lighting as an element that's so essential to that.
Another thing that I've noticed people do really successfully is just get rid of all the lights in the ceiling and it's all accent lighting, sconces, table lamps. And if you go to Europe, they don't have recessed lights unless maybe you're in
Yeah.
like a doctor's office or an office building.
We did that. We had that mandated High Country Motor Lodge. We have no architectural lighting. So when you walk into the lobby, it's all decorative lighting, and
Wow.
it's just a different feel.
Have you found lighting designers, maybe it's Bold or others, that are able to take the Roman and Williams mantra and move that forward without a lot of architectural lighting, which is kind of what they do? Maybe I don't, maybe not. I don't. Maybe it's decorative lighting that they focus on now. What have you seen?
We not really use lighting designers, and we should because we don't do a whole lot of new build, right? So when you do new build, of course you have to have lighting design because
Yeah.
then you have requirements. There has to be lumens like foot candles, right, for safety and security. So things that are important to for plan check and that are fundamental aspects to projects and buildings. Because we inherit most spaces, those things have already been accomplished and achieved, and so then we can do treatments on top of that. So we'll kind of we'll take it upon ourselves. So we actually work with designers all the time that have a requirement for a lighting designer to be part of the team, and we just kind of push back on it and say, well, we think you should do it with us. We're just going to change out these fixtures, and oftentimes we'll just take a decorative or a architectural feature and make it a decorative element, whether it's a flush mount or a hanging light or sconce or otherwise. And so or we'll take it out entirely, in certain areas, or we'll just dim it
So
down
you'll
so it's just.
swap a recessed can for more of a decorative one, or just remove it and put a speaker there in its place or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then I walk back in. I say, "Oh, I screwed up, and we got to put back lighting in." So what? If you have to put back a couple cans because at High Country Motor Lodge, perfect example. There's 3 can lights in the whole lobby, right? Because I screwed up. I took too much out, and so we just had an area where it was a little too dark, and we just have these 3 hanging lights, and they just give enough foot candles so you can walk through without tripping over anything, and that's it. But the rest of it's you know, and you wouldn't even notice. They're still decorative, right? They're still hanging decorative fixtures, but they act as more directional lighting. So yeah.
A lot's changed in your business since we spoke maybe 2 years ago, but I want to first start with like just more broadly, globally. What have you noticed in hospitality that's changed since we last spoke? What are you really interested in? What are you focusing on?
Well, the thing that's changed that is a little jarring is that a lot of our heroes of hospitality of the last decade have come to pass. Seidel Group, which I remember going into the Nomad New York and then the Nomad LA, and then I even loved the Nomad Las Vegas, and walking into these spaces and thinking this is a masterclass in hospitality, and this is completely unattainable to me. I couldn't even conceive of what they were creating, and I still can't because it's really that layered and that expert and it's just so well done. But they didn't for multiple reasons. They're no longer with us, right? Like if they aren't thriving, and these locations have closed and changed, and of course debt, of course, I'm sure had a lot to do with it, right? Taking out too much debt and hoping that the
Yep.
pro forma was different than it was. And those are things that, of course, you talked about well and some of your on the podcast here that you talked to directly to us about, which I appreciate. Ace is kind of gone, right? Like so,
Yep.
Ace just
Although
sold.
it's still worth $80 million, but it's it's kind of gone.
I'd love to have you break that down for all of us because we're all scratching our heads in the valuation, but good for them, right? I mean, they deserve a payday. I'm so glad they got one because they defined hospitality for like a decade and a half, right? I mean, is that how long it was? At least,
Yeah.
maybe more.
Yeah.
And they still have a couple really great projects. The Freehand, which was a genre defining, hostel, and then of course, I guess it was Generator Freehand, and that was all kind of Seidel. So that's the big thing that's changed. Some of these groups and some of these expressions of hospitality that were so definitive for the most of my career in hospitality now because I've been in it for solidly for 15 years. They're coming past, and so it's a little jarring. It makes us take pause. It makes me pause. It makes me think what risk I'm taking on. How am I covering my downside? So getting back to the fundamentals, it's serious, right? These it's interesting, and I don't know to be have a career this long and to see these kinds of the rise and fall of some of these
Yeah.
brands and expressions is kind of it's a moment. So that would be the first thing I would say. I guess the second thing I would say is it's just these same people who kind of defined an era have it's that information and that approach has now been disseminated into the mainstream, and that's exciting. And also then kind of like makes you think, well, if everyone can do it, then it becomes less electrifying and less interesting. And a lot of the things that we were all reaching towards, like the idea of authenticity or hyper local, or working, all the things that they developed now are everyone's doing. So it kind of makes you think, what should you do? How can you respond and react in
Mhm.
this kind of environment where, I guess, of course, Instagram and Pinterest has been responsible for the democratization of design in a way that we could have never predicted, right? Because everyone can just put together a Pinterest board, and then it becomes kind of like quickly homogenized because everybody's copying everybody, and there's less kind of segmentation with information that and inspiration. More of us, I think, should go to Paris, right? And I haven't been to Europe enough at all, but whenever you go there,
We're gonna go together.
they're they're totally. And why does it work? Because it's enduring design, right? Like they the experience that they have in the cafe culture and the hotel, and the professionalism that exists there has existed there for a long time, and therefore it's been honed in a way that just feels a certain way. And so that's probably why the Nomad was so exciting. I think
Yeah.
as a European experience that was brought to the United States that was just done so well. And so we look to places that have kind of enduring experiences that have staying power, and I think that would be just going back to first principles. That's how we think about the timelessness of investing, the timelessness of our design expression. And if you can keep focused on trying to remain as timeless as possible, then all the other things will backfill, whether you want it to be, specific and germane to a certain location, great, as long as it's timeless. As long as if you want to use local artisans to bring in art, great, as long as it's timeless, right? Like I think you can't let the tail wag the dog. You got to be focused on what the core fundamental of what your experience is. And then if you layer in, because it works, then it naturally feels authentic, and it naturally is valuable because it's supportive of the fundamentals. And I think getting centered on the fundamentals, it's always an important and jarring lesson for us to learn and relearn, especially as we go through cycles.
Do you think those companies that kind of have disintegrated, evolved, changed, become less relevant, that there are new ones taking their place, or that's yet to happen and it's still a vacant opportunity?
It's a great question. I when Seidel started to unwind, the first thing I said with my team was like, go on to LinkedIn pages and find out where these people are going. Like, this is the talent they've
A
come
lot
up.
of them started their own companies and they kind of
Yeah.
tried to recreate what it was.
And then I think the difficulty is probably the availability of capital these days, and the ability to source deals. I think the property values have just been too high for people to come in to
Yeah.
to to kind of reposition, and maybe there'll be a reset. But I think that's probably what's limiting the creativity right now. These people are kind of being held back by some of the underpinnings of the economy that just don't let them in to go and get crazy, like Alexander Collywood did in Seattle. Was it Seattle his first one? Yeah, Seattle was the first one, right? And
Seattle
I
or
think they
Portland?
yeah, it was one of those two. I can't remember.
It's too high stakes for maybe someone to take risks like that in a market like that. You could take a risk in maybe a no-name market, but it's I agree. And then I also wonder how much of the design side was really kind of creating those companies that you talked about versus just the company culture or everything combined. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, it's. I think it's when we don't do any limited investing, but the idea of key man risk is such an important point, and I think it comes back to the key man or woman, and I think that those people, the creative directors, the CEOs, the visionaries, to your earlier comment about Steve Jobs. I mean, Apple's done a great job post Steve Jobs, but boy, oh boy, was he the guy, right? And
Yeah.
there's some really key people in those those genre defining organizations that really made it happen. And there's some there and there's still a lot of great people out there that that I'm finding a lot of inspiration recently in the last 4 or 5 years from a group out of San Diego called the Consortium Holdings. Do you know Arsalan?
No. Well, yeah. Well, if that's what they're called, I mean, you've tuned me on to them, and you break it down because you told me this crazy story. We were at dinner one night. I'm like, this doesn't even make any sense. Like, I don't really understand even what he's talking about. And then I went online and Googled this thing for like hours and hours, and I was just sucked in. So tell everyone about your friend in San Diego, which we still need to go together as like a field trip. But I want you to talk about this.
Well, I think we should go together, and I would recommend that everyone go there. I mean, to have a city that is so defined by a person is a remarkable feat, right? Like there's not many, there's, by the way, I was just in Chicago this summer, and I think it's Hogwash Group. Do you know them? His name's Brendan,
No.
I think. I don't know him, but he's defined a really an important part of that city. But the scale that Arsalan has, Consortium Holding has in San Diego is spectacular. And to just walk into a city and to have so many experiences that are so specific and different from one to the next, from one person, from one creative mind, is just. I mean, it's like a living, museum, or kind of like a living laboratory to this person's creative expression. And to have a body of work that is that deep and that layered and that concentrated is just amazing. And I would say, without going too deep on any one specific concept, there is just not a better experience or an example, in my opinion, of the intersection of art and commerce than there is with the projects that Consortium Holdings does. And that's been exciting and invigorating from a design perspective to see a group so committed to each and every one of their concepts that they undertake kind of such ambitious design expressions with great risk. I mean, it doesn't work with all people, right? This is really because it's so connected to this one person and his incredibly tight knit team. And of course, it is a team, but they're working together in a way that is just truly inspired and inspiring. So I don't know how they do it. I just truly don't know how they do it. The level of detail, the level of commitment to these concepts, how scrappy they are to be able to create these experiences. And, I don't think you could do it I couldn't do it because we don't have the expertise. Forget the fact that I don't have the kind of creative genius, but we don't fit fundamentally have the expertise to build these experiences, right? Like I think there's there's as much on the idea side as there is on the execution side that is creates a kind of competitive moat around what they're doing that I just don't think you could roll in and and try and either copy or replicate. I just don't think it's possible. That's pretty amazing. You couldn't
I
just.
also think it's tied into the location. Like another person that I think has some great design, Steven Starr and like Keith McNally in New York, but they're like very focused on those markets because I guess they've worked with tradespeople or designers or in this market for so long, they can find people to do what they want. For you, you have a diverse portfolio. Unless you're flying people all around, it might be hard to execute something that's like so transformative on such a unique scale like that. I mean, you go to a Steven Starr restaurant in Philadelphia, for example, there's one called Park, and you feel like you're sitting in a Parisian brasserie, similar to some of the stuff in New York. And it's not like a copy. You feel like that way because they've bought stuff from Europe and they've put it in the restaurant.
Yeah, I totally agree. And isn't it amazing? I just think it's just such a wonderful, like, I think there was a period in time where that, because it was hard to do and it wasn't done well, that people kind of turned their nose up at the idea of going that deep on a concept. But for the people that can do it and they can execute it at a level that is so truly committed, that you so greatly feel transformed that it now is possible, right? And one of there's a book called Disney's Land about the making of
Yep.
Disneyland, which is have you read that? It's a fun read. And
I started it. I have to finish it.
he did it, and that's the roadmap as to how they created Disneyland. And of course, the knock for some of these layered concept experiences was that it was kind of Disneyland-esque, and for a while it probably was, but not anymore. I think
Nope.
it's just, when it's done well, it's just so great. but it's very difficult, exceedingly difficult to do.
I
Which is,
also think it's even more difficult to do in the context of a traditional private equity model. And you talk about your family having a very long legacy lens. And sometimes you just invest in a property and it has to be over time. And it also has to kind of patina and age over time. We went to the Sierra News Hotel in Positano recently, and now it's owned by one of the kids, the son. And it didn't just, you can't just develop that and start it. It has to be just layers and layers and people working there for 20 and 30 years. And then you tweak little components as you go. And in a investment model where you're looking to be out of something in 5 to 7 years, it's difficult. And then I also think it's even more difficult because there just aren't as many beautiful buildings, beautiful locations to acquire. So given the cost to hire people, the cost to build a team, it becomes exceedingly difficult if you have this short kind of burst that's driven by cycles where you can act when there just might not be a one of a kind hotel that pops on your desk every 3 months or 6 months for you to buy and transform.
yeah, I totally agree. And I think the ones that are really, El Encanto just sold that hotel in Santa Barbara,
Yep.
and we were looking at it very seriously. And it's it's one
I'm
of those
surprised you
kinds of
didn't buy
places.
that.
Well, we got outpriced, and we could, we reached our limit, and even at our limit, our business plan was basically just to run it and try and stabilize it and live with it for a while before we did anything. It was ended up being kind of like a very high end covered land play, but because the physical asset was so important and historic, and because we thought we could just, you know, manage it, within our own capabilities in a way that was acceptable to our risk profile, that we would go for it. But that we would have owned it for a whole debt cycle before we probably reinvested in. You would have been like, "Hey, John, when are you going to do something with El Encanto? It's wonderful as it is, but I thought you were going to push your mark on it." It probably would have been 5 to 7 years before we even started. So, to your point about a private equity model, that's some of them have that,
Right.
right? That can be like a core investment strategy, but then they have to put on a different hat and maybe a different fund or a different kind of capital resource within their fund to then come back and reinvest in it at a later date. So, and that would be like a 15-year hold for them at a minimum.
Yeah, I think it's maybe going to be a family legacy asset for them too. I know the designer on that project. I'll tell you it offline because maybe it's confidential, but I'm very close with the person, and I think they're going full out at the start. And I think that's exciting. But I also, one of the things that I've learned over the past few years is a lot of the ideas that I have during a due diligence process or an acquisition process ultimately end up changing when you really get in, you understand how the property's used. So you might have these big ideas, but I think it's a mistake to go execute on all of them right at the beginning, actually. The ones that, maybe are not as obvious, but just to do everything is a challenge. Maybe you can talk about that because I know that's the same for you.
It's a really good point, and I think that's having our patient capital and a longer term horizon allows us to do just that. And I think one thing that I've learned that we also practice is we really truly believe that most people, most investors or creators or developers or designers, most people do most of the things right. Like more is right than wrong. And so if you come with that lens and you really drill down on what is right and that what and doesn't need to be then repaired, it still dovetails into the idea of don't fight the building. But in this case, it's like don't let your ego get the best of you, right? We all want to come in and do our thing, and we all think we can do better because if we didn't think that, no, we wouldn't be doing it. We wouldn't believe in the project. Sure, that's a fundamental truth, but it's important to catch myself, and say, "Hey, that's a pretty good layout after all. I didn't like it at the beginning, but now I understand it. I don't need to change the front door, and make the entry in a different location. I don't need to, flip the bar around. I don't, like all those things actually work. They work fine." And so, but it takes time. It's important to let that wash over you. And if you can have a full season, like a full year in a space, it matters the time of year. It matters when the light's coming through. It matters when the business peaks and valleys are. like the spaces are used differently at different times of the year and for different reasons and purposes. And so you can't really get to know any place for less than a year if you really want to try and understand what the experience is there. So to your point, we practice that, and if we can take our time, that it really, I think you end up with a better product overall, and ideally you spent less money.
You recently fully repositioned two hotels, one in Carmel and one in Southern California. Can you pick one and kind of illustrate through that whole process what your approach is, kind of start to finish? These were assets that you owned and that you were completely reimagining from a branding, story, design, I assume everything. Talk us through kind of that process, start to finish, how that works for you.
Oh, how much time do we have? No, I think
Give me the
I
greatest
I can give
hits
you the overview. Yeah, I can give
because
you
we
play
need
the
to have
hits.
you come on a third time, so I can't reveal like all of your secrets on the second interview.
I think I would pick so the two ones that we just repositioned. And by the way, we can talk also about repositioning of our entire brand. I
I
don't
want
think
to do
that
that.
we were Mark and Rose when we spoke last. Now we're Mark and Rose. We used to be Classic Hotels, but this dovetails to somewhat to that brand repositioning. But the two hotels that you're talking about, the first is called La Playa Hotel in Carmel. The second is in Laguna Beach. It used to be called Inn at Laguna Beach. Now it's called Casa Loma Beach Hotel. Obviously, Casa Loma, it's a rename, a rebrand. I mean, that was a big. I could pick either, but because Casa Loma was even a rename, let's maybe take that one.
Great.
Um, it was the second. This would be that in both cases, it was my second time refreshing.
Mm,
So we'd already owned, repositioned or refreshed, lived the course of a full term of a loan. In this case, 10-year loan, and for both hotels actually, one was a 15-year, one was a 10-year, and we replaced the debt, and then we then took it at that time to reposition the hotel. So what do we have? We have this amazing hotel an amazing location on the north end of Main Beach in Laguna, which is basically walkable to everything in the town of Laguna. It's right on the bluffs looking over the ocean. It's an old historic hotel site, but it was rebuilt and redeveloped, I think, in 1989. So it kind of has that 80s architecture, which can be problematic in Southern California. But in this case, we believe and we are still in touch with the architect. We believe it's a beautiful building, and it just needed to be better celebrated. And so we took it upon ourselves really to say, what's the intrinsic value of these spaces that this notable architect created, and what are the ways in which we want guests to interact. And so we had a couple of important constraints. First and foremost, we couldn't, not only do we not find the building in general, but we specifically don't do that anywhere in the Coastal Commission purview, because it's just like what is it? What is the recipe for malcontent is, wishing things were different than they are.
right.
You can't touch the outside. Don't do it. Don't even bother. Like, it's brain damage that none of us can put ourselves through, or shouldn't, and some do. And I respect, of course, those who can get it done. It's a totally different skill set. Like Rick Caruso in Santa Barbara, what he created up there. I mean, he is truly a master at entitlement and truly a master of creating things that others cannot. I mean, three people failed before him, right? I think it
Yep.
was two or three
Yep.
people. He's a master. So we're not that. so knowing that we're not that, and knowing we don't have those capabilities, we took the outside of the wall as the limit to our inquiry. And then we also looked at the brand and we said, wow, there's 23 different hotels and inns in Laguna that have the name Laguna in it. And even worse, we have the inn at Laguna Beach, and there was one called the Laguna Beach Inn, like a block, 4 blocks away. So people were literally showing up to the wrong hotel on a consistent basis. And that's pretty problematic. And so we broke a rule of real estate, and we stopped calling a place by the name of the town, which of course is the brand itself. Like the brand Laguna Beach is what you're selling.
Yep.
Therefore, all the hotels are basically independent. They don't have to be affiliated with the brand to get business. But we took a risk saying, of course, the world has changed. SEO has changed. Marketing, branding, social media, all the things that we can now utilize to tell our story have changed. And we decided to take the risk and take the name Laguna out of it. And so that was something we probably, a couple of years debated that. It was like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like just like I just woke up and said, oh, we're going to do this. It was like, pretty cautious and thoughtful process, and then we went for it. And I think the thing that we did there was, my vision for that project was to bring together two design teams that I've been wanting to work with for a while, and who I've admired deeply. The interior designer was Electric Bowery out of Venice Beach, and I've really been admiring the work that they've done. In particular, what they did at the Silver Lake Pool and Inn, which became a
Yep.
Pally hotel halfway through the process, and is still thriving and was just awesome. They've gone on to do a number of other great projects, of course. And then I had also been wanting to work with Land previously out of Austin. I think they went back to their hometowns and maybe San Antonio. But Ryan and Caleb from Land, who I've just been following their work for at least 15 years, and everything they do is just amazing in a way that is sort of easily imitated but never replicated, right? Like
What is their
they use
skill set?
they're the branding firm.
Branding. Okay.
So they helped me rename it. They did all of the rebranding, and then on top of that, they actually are their prominence is in text-based art. So like, if you look them up, you'll just be like, oh, I know them from this, that, and the other, and you'll see dozens of other people who copied their style and approach, which is easy again to copy but impossible to replicate. And then we asked them not only to rebrand it, but I had this idea that I would pair Electric Bowery, who has a beautiful and restrained but sophisticated design approach, with Land, who has a similar graphics and branding approach, and marry them up in a way that we hadn't done so formally and succinctly in a project before. And that led into the idea that I wanted Land to kind of have the full artistic expression of the building, so that everywhere you went was like walking through a gallery of Land design and art. And so
Wow.
every room has a custom art piece that they created. Every robe in every room was designed by them. Every throw blanket was designed by them. Like we used their design, and we came together with a list of artisans from Lithuania to Antigua and Guatemala, and like blanketed all experiences by Land. And then we went a step further, and we took all the products that they had designed and we put them throughout the hotel. So like, they designed Madre Mezcal, Calidad beer. There's a couple of different packaged goods that they've designed. So like, everything that you touch in the hotel, almost everything, has their design on it. So you walk in, and it's like these things all had a similar language. And it was
Interesting.
a pretty fun kind of challenge. And I think it's just it washes over you in a way that's very subtle, but noticeable when you kind of experience the space. And then the last kind of major move was this giant bas relief that we did in the lobby. We have a 2-story lobby there, and I said, guys, I want to do like a big bas. They had the idea for a bas relief, and I said, I want to do it in the lobby. And we had 3 or 4 different versions. Once we landed on the design that we did, we actually had to do it twice. And I physically was there, kind of like installing the bas relief, and that was super fun to kind of get the curvature done correctly. And it was just it's just fun to have a full experience that is like these two people's personalities so beautifully kind of enmeshed. And I just create the conditions for the sparks to fly, and then I push it along, and I call balls and strikes, and plan out what's feasible and what's not feasible. But that part was really fun. And then another wonderful partner in that project and at La Playa was this music consulting group that we worked with called Uncanned. Actually, first experienced Uncanned at one of the Consortium Holding projects and got an introduction through them. But they're just an amazing music advisor and music and speaker infrastructure advisor. So we bought all the speakers through them or at their direction. And we had this amazing music program and a reel-to-reel player that has, a large format reel-to-reel tape where the music is played. And the music is a really important component in that it's everywhere on property. So when you walk in, you see a reel-to-reel playing at the front, at the
Wow.
bar. And then as you walk through the space, the music follows you all through the property. But most fun is that it follows you into the guest room, where we have a FM station that's rebroadcasting the music. So every one of the radios is tuned to the private kind of FM radio frequency. So when you walk in, it's like it follows you through the whole way. And that dovetails into the food and beverage experience, because we have a conditional use permit, which we will not change, but that permit allows us only to serve, limited bites, light bites
You gotta
to
love
guests.
California.
We actually love this because this is another thing we looked at. We said, oh, wouldn't it be great if the world was different? Well, it's not different. We're not going to have a restaurant and bar to serve the public.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that. We can't do that. So we don't have a permanent bar. We don't have a kitchen. We don't have the right to install any of those things, nor do we want to. And we said, okay, team, here's all these amazing constraints. The vision is that we want you to create an experience that is like a private beach club on the beach for the guests and guests only. Guests of guests only. And so what that means is you have text-based ordering. Of course, you can order anything you want in the lobby, but everything else can be ordered at any location of the property. So if you're up on the terrace watching the sunset, you just order from your phone. If you're down by the pool, we walk around with cold grapes and wipes and stuff like that. But on top of that, we'll send all the food to any location in the hotel.
But
So
what
it
are they
ends up
ordering?
being
If you don't have a kitchen, how do you make any food or drinks? What's the
so
secret?
we've taken great inspiration from a really great and creative group out of Santa Monica called Lady and Larder. They do incredible charcuterie boards. So we've taken some inspiration from them, and then we have a little turbo oven, like a
Yeah.
Subway style turbo
Yeah.
oven where you can make some eggs. And then we have great partners with Raw Goods, who's this an amazing cafe and bakery. And so, yeah, is it a 3 meal? Yes, we serve food 3 meals a day. We serve food all day long, but it's not designed to be that. It's designed to be at a place where you can have 1 or 2 meals a day. But because you were walking distance to every single restaurant in town, we're selling to town too. So if you wake up with your kids and you want breakfast, we got you. If you're out by the pool with your kids, and you want some lunch, we got you. If you're up watching the sunset before you're going out to dinner, we can take care of all that. Or if you decide to stay in, we still have something of a sustenance like rice, your grain bowl, and a hearty salad and some, a toasted sandwich. Like it's not a perfect dinner, but if you're just so tired and you don't want to leave because you had a great day on the beach, we can meet those needs. And I think tapping into like what's been popular about the clubs, this whole club movement, which would be a podcast, entirely by
It would
itself,
be.
is to say, let's lean into that. Let's give you, your room rate and purchasing a room here gives you exclusive access to an experience that is not purchasable anywhere else in Laguna and is an exclusive to you, so that when you show up with your kids, when they're running around in the lobby, you're not like apologizing for that. You're being embraced for that, and that you can just spread out, right? There's never a situation where you can't find a seat, and that's a little bit the opposite of where we all want to be. We all want to have the buzzy restaurant, the bar, and those things can be huge profit generators and create a brand experience that is obviously important. But since we don't have that option, it's fun to lean the other way and say, yeah, this is a place to chill. This is a place to relax. This is a place to not have to apologize for, your kids having fun and doing all the things they want to do on the beach and running in and out and enjoy the lobby. So it's been a really fun challenge, and I hope you come down and check it out and you can give me your feedback.
I'm gonna go this summer. So we're gonna see it, if not before. On that project, I'm curious, what came first? So did you have land do like a vision and a story, and then you kind of integrated the design team, or was it kind of happening at the same time along with the music? How did you kind of set the path, and then they could all work together?
Land came first, and the name didn't come first, but the idea of kind of what the atmospherics of the experience came with land, through land, and my direction. My brief is pretty specific, so I briefed them first. I gave it to land. They kind of sent it back to me, and then I gave the same brief and stuff, and then land's concept to Electric Bowery, and then they gave me theirs back. So it's a multi-step process, and I'm kind of the intermediary where I'm, conducting, how deep to layer into one idea or concept or the other. And so it was iterative, it was collaborative. I spent, a fair bit of time pushing them together and getting them on this. Never got them in the same room, but always on the same Zoom call. And I was with both of the design teams in person at different times on the property as well. So there was plenty of kind of pre kickoff work that we did to kind of set the path. And then from there, it continues to flourish. So we didn't know at that time that we were going to have all of this additional art. I extended the scope halfway through and said, Land, I know we're signed up for this amount of money, but I want this, this, and this. Can you rebid it? And we went and we rebid it, and they created all this custom original art that,
Wow.
is specific to our brand that we had the right to use in it. And they delivered an incredible body of work. So yeah, it was really fun. And then bringing in the music, you bring in the music a little bit later because then you can show them, the visuals. And then I also, I'm kind of a music nut. I mean, I have deep briefing on the music and put together a little playlist. But mostly with the music group, I'll share with you sometime. Like, we use a lot of written words to inspire the. Like, it's less like,
Really?
here's 10 songs I want you to feel like this. They know way more than I do. I just say, this is what I want to feel. This is, one of the briefs was like, I'm a surfer. Take me to Scorpion Bay, which is in Baja. It's an iconic old school, surf safari type destination, way off the beaten path. And so I said, this is the place. Here's some ideas that supported the travel and the inspired kind of adventure that occurred by people stumbling upon or seeking out Scorpion Bay, and like, make a playlist for Scorpion Bay. And they would have to like dig in a little bit and, figure out what that meant. And we did another one for a famous surf wave in Morocco. And, so there's places that I pointed to that I said, this moment in time at this location, this is what the brief is for the music. There was The Happening in Laguna Canyon. That was an easy one. And so those sorts of things. It's more kind of like trusting, and truthfully, they have such a deeper knowledge of music than I could ever imagine. So, I just know enough to be dangerous and point them in the direction. But I'll send you some of the playlists. They're really fun.
I want to, yeah, I want to see it because Nine Orchard had a cool music situation when I checked that hotel out. And I've noticed that, even visible speakers are becoming more of a thing in restaurant, like architectural, very high end. And it's something that we're thinking through at properties because it really just creates and sets you in a mood and completely changes your whole state and physiology if you have a certain kind of music on, and it's important.
I'm glad you brought up Nine Orchard because my idea, I stole the idea from them for the music in the rooms. So that project is incredible. When people say, what's your favorite hotel in New York? There's many, and it depends on the era. It depends on the, what you're looking at
Yep.
it for. But in this moment, I've stayed in Nine Orchard 3 times. I
Yeah.
try not to repeat, that is a masterpiece. But to see those Ojos speakers, which are so beautiful, and then to Stretch Armstrong did all the music supervision, and he's a pretty iconic, a DJ for, I don't know, 3 decades now in New York, and just to see how they layered in the music and then having that 4-channel selector in your room. Did you see that where you can
So
change it?
cool.
There's
Yeah.
there's
It's
four
just
different four
changing the
different channels.
vibe. Like it,
I was just like,
it,
oh, this is so good. And so I said, okay, we can't afford that. I can't hire Devin Turnbull. I can't hire Stretch Arms. I'm not going to do. That's just not something we can do because it's not possible and it's already been done. But what's our scrappy way of getting that similar experience? And so, we bought like a $500 FM modulator, plugged it into the back of the reel to reel, and then all of a sudden, when you walk in, you don't have 4 channels to choose from, but you got one, and it's the music that, but we can change it too. It doesn't have to be from the reel to reel. We can change it so it can be an entirely different playlist, and you can have a different experience. And so there's ways that you can take inspiration from other places and formulate it, to meet our constraints in our market and get most of the way there if we can. I was going to say the music thing also that we lean into heavily was kind of music programming. So I mentioned before we got on about the Flagstaff Fadeaway, which was a mini music festival that we put on. It was kind of an audacious goal. It was a 1-day, a 5-band mini music festival that we put on in the courtyard at the High Country Motor Lodge in Flagstaff. We did it 2 years ago. It was so much fun. Took a tremendous amount of time and effort, and it's significant cost, and we didn't cover our costs. We hoped to break even, but we didn't. But the goal was to set forth and create a center of gravity and a commitment to music, and then we thought, well, we can do this every year, but it was too hard. So we pivoted and we said, okay, instead of doing this every year, we've created this brand, the Flagstaff Fadeaway, pivoted to this thing called the Fadeaway Sessions. And the Fadeaway Sessions now are a music monthly series at the High Country Motor Lodge, which was inspired specifically by the Tourist Welcome Hotel. The guys from Wilco
No,
own
yeah, I
that
know
hotel.
Wilco, but they have a hotel.
Yeah, the Tourist Welcome Hotel, which was also designed by Land, coincidentally, on the branding side. But they have this thing called Sing for Your Slumber. And because of their network, kind of where they are, people come out and we'll do like a 30 or 45-minute set in the lobby, and they'll get a free night to stay at the hotel. So we took that and there's
So
also the
cool.
artist in residency program at the Ace Hotel, which is similar. And there's a few others that we researched, but we specifically keyed into that one. And so we said, well, let's do something similar. We built it around the same fundamentals, and we're Fadeaway Sessions now. Because we're on Route 66 in Flagstaff, there's no surprise that there's a lot of bands that drive back and forth, and it's a pretty cool place to stop off. You show up, get a free room, nice food and beverage stipend. We have a pretty cool partnership with a brand out of Australia called Pony Rider. So they get all this cool swag from Pony Rider, which is awesome. And then they play an hour-long set in the lobby. And the cool thing, in the first season, we committed to recording every one of those sessions specifically with professional audio recording, and also with some really good photo and film capture. And we've just finished the first season, and we're now going to press those sessions to vinyl. So we're going to take one or two songs from each session, press it to a vinyl, and then put that on the website. The website's pretty robust, and it shows you the whole list of people that have played. But then we hope that this will live larger beyond the walls of the hotel, that people will be connected with the bands and buy the vinyl. And then any proceeds, if we ever get there, are 100% donated back to environmental causes that we support through our 1% for the Planet affiliation, which is another conversation. We're probably the first hotel management company to join 1% for the Planet, which was founded by Yvon Chouinard of Patagonia, who I'm
Mm-hmm.
obviously a huge fan of and very inspired by. And so kind of taking together these different passions of ours, music, culture, the environment, and bringing them into one holistic endeavor, which is now called the Fadeaway Sessions, is something that has been a really fun journey. We plan to continue it at Flagstaff, and we've already rolled it out in Carmel, La Playa. We have a really great partner there named Britt Govia of Folkia, who's over the last 2 years the premier, preeminent music event producer in Northern California, and he lives in Carmel. So he
Amazing.
comes into the bar every Thursday. There, it's only DJ sessions, which is really amazing. But every one of those sessions is also recorded, and those are all recorded directly to reel. So you can actually, and we're just about to launch a music
Wow.
menu. So when you come in, it'll say who played and when they played, and when they have a catalog of all these sessions that you can actually come into the bar and request to we've had some big people there, like Ty Segall played recently, and there's a number, and there's a long list of great people. But for example, if you wonder if you're a Ty Segall set, you could request that, and if we were able to, the bartender would, in between drinks, swap out the tape, and then you could listen to the whole 90-minute set from Ty Segall, which is kind of fun. So we don't want to leave things hanging. If you're going to make the effort, follow through. The initial effort is 90% of the work, but that last 10% doesn't take much, just to record it and then put it in the menu. And then all of a sudden it lives larger and longer than it would have, because if you missed the original session, then you missed it. But we want you to feel like you can still get access to it. If you want to buy the vinyl, you can buy the vinyl. If you want to come into, listen to the tape in the bar and drink a martini, then that's great too. And then we're going to move on forward, hopefully down in Laguna at Casa Loma. We're currently talking with a local musician and can't announce it yet, but if we're able to come together there, it would be a really special partner in producing the music events that are all part of this umbrella. But in each location, we have a different musical partner, and that's just by necessity, because we can't have one person cover the waterfront. But it's even more important to connect with the local area, because the people that we're partnered with really understand the place and are in the flow, and they know when people are coming and going. And so the meanderings of this kind of networking, it never ceases to surprise me and delight. So, anyways, the Fadeaway session is a lot of fun.
You're an icon. This is definitely going to be one of my favorite episodes. You're going to have to come back for a third. I asked this traditional closing question, which is, what is your favorite hotel? But we kind of heard a version of that the first time. So most recently, what hotel are you most inspired by?
Oh man, I should have prepared for this. I would say I would go back to Consortium Holdings. I think anyone who's interested in hotels, experiential, immersive like food and beverage and service, should go to San Diego, and they should go stay at the Hotel Lafayette. And he's just about to open a new one called the Baby Grand, which is out in Coronado.
Oh,
But I
wow.
would go there. Go to Lafayette and
Done. We're going together. We're going.
You'll be blown away. You'll be blown away. I love it. Yeah,
I
let's
know.
put it on the calendar.
100%. Thanks for coming on again. You're a rock star.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, man. Hey, everyone. It's Jake here. Thanks again for joining me on this conversation. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Jake Wurzak. I'll see you in the next episode.
Jake Wurzak is the founder and CEO of Dove Hill Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Jake and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Dove Hill Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not reflect or represent real estate, financial, or investment advice.